With the playoffs on the line and the Little Brass Bell in attendance, North Central and Wheaton clash in a defensive dogfight. And we sit down with the local football products turned Cardinal football players to talk about their old teams heading to the playoffs. I'm Kevin Jackman. All that and more is coming up next on the Red Zone. It's the 67th installment of the battle for the Little Brass Bell against Wheaton College, and it comes on homecoming with huge playoff implications on the line. These two teams may have come in with the two highest-scoring offenses in the conference, but defense dominates the game early. Eric Wilson comes around the edge and knocks down Thunder quarterback Andrew Bowers not once, but twice early. Logan McCray of Wheaton sees that and matches it on the other end, tracking Dylan Warden down from behind near the goal line, and then later grabbing the freshman Justin Hunneford and bringing him down. McCray now the conference leader with 8 sacks on the season. But Wilson gets the last laugh in the first quarter here as he comes loose after a botched screen to the far side. And Wilson tomahawked the ball out of Bauer's hands, and Amonte Logan scoops it up. Cardinals take over, and the fans are a little excited. Cardinals couldn't put it in the end zone on that drive, and a missed field goal for NCC means the first quarter ends without a single score. But the Cardinals do strike first. Next offensive series, Dom Zavalia comes out and knocks one through to put the Cardinals up by 3. Wheaton finally getting something going on offense. Bowers swings it out to sophomore back Shola Olateju, and he turns on the Jets for a pickup of 27 yards. Wheaton draws even just a few minutes after the Cardinals took a lead. It's now 3-3 just before half. Winding down towards intermission, the Cardinals attacking with some trickery on the end around, and it's Alex Ulmer throwing to Dylan Warden, who snatches it with one hand on the sideline. Same drive, 4th and 4, and the Cardinals can't convert, turning it over on downs to the Thunder with 26.6 seconds remaining on the clock. Wheaton pushing the ball within striking distance of a Hail Mary just to give themselves a chance, and Bowers goes deep, and Zach Lindquist comes down with the football and staggers into the end zone. The Cardinals can't believe it, and neither could we, so let's take another look, and yep, he got in. Good call. Wheaton goes into the half up 10-3. Thunder taking that momentum and carrying it right into the second half as Bowers finds Trey Hanley with a perfectly placed rope. Wheaton taking what feels like a commanding 17-3 lead. Cardinals trying to answer, but facing another 4th down conversion, and Warden comes through, taking off with the feet and flying past the chains to keep the drive alive. But 3 plays later, Warden trying to convert on 3rd and 18 after an intentional grounding, and the pass is picked off by Tyler Sigler. The score stays the same as we skip ahead to the 4th quarter. North Central back with it, and Dylan Warden taking advantage of a free play by heaving it downfield, and the ball gets deflected by Kyle Brown right into the hands of Nolan Brannick. NCC has another chance in the red zone. Warden looking for his big tight end, but throws it into traffic, and another pick for the junior QB. Cardinals need a stop, or better yet, a turnover. Brandon Kibbe rips it away, and the Cardinals back in business. 4th and 10 now. The Cardinals desperate for a score to stay in the game, and it's Warden finding Ryan Cool for the biggest completion of the game. NCC now inside the 5, and time to turn to Austin Brunig. Handoff right side, and he's picked up immediately, shakes loose, and dives in the end zone. Touchdown, Austin Brunig. Austin Brunig, the sophomore, sneaks in. Onside kick attempt, no good. Wheaton takes over, and it's the running back Olateju effectively icing the clock as Wheaton claims the Little Brass Bell for his 2nd straight year, remains undefeated as the Cardinals drop to 4-3 on the season and now need help trying to make the postseason. Welcome inside the Red Zone, joined as always by head football coach Jeff Thorne. Coach, that defensive effort by your team was just it was sensational on Saturday. How proud of you were you guys? You held a team that averages 48 points a game to 17. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
It was, yeah, exactly that. It was an incredible performance by our defense. Very proud. Mm-hmm. They were challenged all week because obviously last year was a tough week against Wheaton. They struggled, and Wheaton had kind of had their way, and it was a complete reversal. They did a great job. Great plan by the defensive staff, and our kids did a wonderful job executing.
Now, one guy that we're actually going to have on the show today, Eric Wilson, set the tone in that first quarter. That first series, 2 sacks. I mean, was that something that you could have predicted coming into the game, seeing him making such a huge impact right off the get-go?
You know, not necessarily Eric himself in particular or any other individual player. Eric was moved. He came and was going to play running back. In the spring, we moved him to linebacker, and he came and it wasn't going quite as we had planned at linebacker yet, and we had all those injuries to our defensive ends, and we thought, wow, this could be a really good opportunity for the team, also for Eric to get on the field faster, and he's been outstanding, as you saw on Saturday. He's got a great skill set to work with.
Speed around the edge was pretty fun to watch. Have you seen a first quarter like that, a defensive end just come out and make that big of an impact right off the bat?
I'd have to go back a long ways, if ever, that one guy has had that big of an impact in the first quarter of a game. Yeah, it was really important, too, because they had that big play to open the game, and then Eric turned the tables on him with those couple of sacks.
Now, another guy that made a big impact on defense was Justin Sturzma. You look at the final stat sheet, 2 sacks, a bunch of tackles, but you really can't quantify the impact that he has on the field because it almost seems like he's everywhere.
Yeah.
Is that what you guys see?
Justin's long. He's 6'1", 6'2". He's lean, but he's fast. And you just can't replace speed. There's no answer for speed. And obviously that's what Wheaton's defense has. They have tremendous speed. Justin gives that to us on our side, along with some other guys. But in the middle, he really does a great job of running sideline to sideline with that speed.
Now, we've seen some great linebackers in the past 10, 15 years, even maybe farther back than that. Can Tom Sawyer and Justin Sturzma kind of carry that torch and become the next great set of linebackers over the next 2.5 years?
They're doing a great job right now. You know, we've got some young linebackers, too, that are in the mix. DJ Workenthien is getting on the field quite a bit this year as a freshman. And there's some other freshmen, too, that are going to be involved in that so that we don't just have 2 guys having to take all the reps. But they're doing a great job right now, the 2 of those guys.
One guy that we've seen make a big play earlier in the year, that was against the Wesley team, that big receiver, and he made a big interception. Brandon Kibbe came up, probably one of the biggest plays of the game because it turned the tide in the fourth quarter. You guys got the ball back and you scored on the following possession. How big was that interception? And he just seems to find the ball in the big spots.
Yeah, it was huge because we had just turned the ball, thrown an interception in the end zone. We made the tackle to keep the guy from running the thing all the way back, thankfully, and that's what we keep talking to our guys about. If something negative happens, make a tackle, give our defense a chance, and they did, and Brandon came up with a big play. He's been battling injuries for the last few weeks, so to get him back was really critical for this game.
Now, one thing, we talked about the history of the linebacker position, the history of the defensive back position. You look at Shane Durkin, Josh McLeod, Trey Hardeman as of late. These guys were established players. They leave the program. Kevin Nalewski, Rich Zerngable, these guys step in, and they look like you guys haven't skipped a beat. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're playing at a high level, both those 2. They can run. Again, it goes back to speed, and when you have speed, you can get some pretty good things done.
Offensively, it just seemed like the running game was bottled up. I don't know if it was whether the offensive line didn't necessarily get the push or the defensive line for Wheaton just maybe had more speed than what you had seen prior to this game, but Austin Brunig was fighting for yards. And, I mean, he got that touchdown on what was an incredible play, really busted a tackle in the backfield. But what did you see at that line of scrimmage, that battle for the line of scrimmage?
Give Wheaton credit. They did a great job. They're a very, very stout defensive front, and their linebackers run so well, and they're really aggressive in filling. And we had some communication issues up front that we found out on Sunday, unfortunately. Didn't hear too much about it on Saturday, but they did a great job. Give them credit. As the head coach and the offensive coordinator, I didn't have the answers, and that's something we got to get fixed going forward. We keep talking about being close in these games, and you've got to find a way. You've got to make the plays that are most important in the game, and the play before halftime really was a backbreaker, and so those are the things that we got to work on. We're still a really, really good football team at 4-3, and I think the national landscape is telling you that, keeping us at 19th nationally with 3 losses. I think they're respecting the schedule that we've played. But again, I go back to we need to win those games. We're in position 2, and we got to finish.
Well, we got a big game coming up, Illinois Wesleyan. We'll get to that in a little bit. I want to talk about those 2 red zone interceptions because those are things that you go back on tape and you kind of try and assess and fix. As a coaching staff, when you look at those, what were the mistakes made, and how do you kind of fix those moving forward?
You know, it's a combination of things. It's not always that play. Maybe it's a play that happened before that caused you to be in that situation. Right. In that particular scenario, the first one, we had gotten called for intentional grounding, and that's one where we got to make sure we're out of the pocket and don't take that big penalty to put us in that situation. So there's a combination of things that we got to look at and get fixed. We got to be more settled at quarterback in the pocket and not running around quite as much, settle our feet down, and those things will help, and those are fixable things, and Dylan's done that in the past, so we'll get it fixed.
Now, we got a big game coming up, Illinois Wesleyan. We want to talk about that. We'll put Wheaton behind us officially, and we want to break down some game tape as well coming up.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back on the Red Zone.
Before we break down tape with Coach Thorne, it's time for this week's Cardinal Corner. With our area high school football teams heading to the IHSA playoffs, we ask some of our local products turned North Central football players about their experiences in the high school postseason.
I just remember the stands being completely filled. Everybody was either like on the track or in the stands, and even our like cafeteria area, like both end zones were just completely piled up. They didn't have enough seats for everybody, and it was just an amazing atmosphere, a crazy game, and I mean, I'll remember it forever.
We had two great teams. We were undefeated until the semifinals of my junior year and lost to Mount Carmel in just a great game, and we should have had the onside kick, but who's looking back at that now? And then that year we also played with Bonzi in the playoffs, who's our huge rival, and that was Dylan Warren's team at the time.
As for how they believe their old teams will fare this year,
they're having a great season. I know they won the DVC and they only lost one game, so I mean they're doing a great job.
Their offense isn't really doing too hot right now, but I think if they execute their plays, they'll make a run.
Only time will tell how the Red Hawks and Wildcats do this postseason. We'll be right back on the Red Zone.
Cinderella found the pet that fits her perfectly, and you can too. Share your heart, share your love. Make a shelter pet part of your world. Happily Ever After begins at theshelterpetproject.org.
Back here on the Red Zone, and time to break down some tape. And Coach, the first play I want to get to is one of the 3 sacks in the first quarter from Eric Wilson. It was the second one, and it really showed the speed and kind of the motor of Eric Wilson. He came around the edge and didn't get there the first time. You saw Bowers kind of maneuver in the pocket, and here he comes.
Yeah, Eric he's very athletic, and that's why we thought he'd be a great defensive end for us. He's runs in the 4.6s, and that's pretty rare for a defensive lineman, and he's a physical kid, so he's doing a great job for us. That was a great play.
We've seen you convert, wide receivers. Nick Slezak was a wide receiver, now defensive back, then turn middle linebacker. Is that just something that you guys as a coaching staff assess and say, this guy has speed, maybe not necessarily has a spot, but let's bring him into the fold defensively and see what he can do?
Yeah, you've got to find, every year it's like a puzzle, and you have to take your players, and they've got to fit right into the puzzle to make it work. So you look at their skill set, and you see how can they help the team, how can we help them get onto the field first. That first and foremost. We never want to move a kid where he's going to fall on the depth chart. They always want to climb on the depth chart, and we've had a lot of success with that. And guys have been open-minded to it too. In Eric's case, he was more than willing to give it a try.
Now the second play we want to get to, we alluded to it in the first segment, it's the Brandon Kibbe interception. It just seemed like he stepped through and really came out of nowhere. It wasn't an interception that was careless. It wasn't a bad throw from Bowers. It just seemed like Kibbe stepped right out in front of it, and he's done this at least once this year, maybe a couple other times.
Yeah, it's just breaking on the ball and having the acceleration to get over the top. That was just a basic slant route. It wasn't a bad throw, you're right. He just made a great play on it.
We've talked about this in the past. Instinctual, is that just the cornerback reading and jumping?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Not
plant
even game
drive.
tape.
Yep. Instinctual, then plant your feet and drive.
The final play, and it was the play that really made the game interesting, was the Austin Brunig run. Up in the booth, I gave up on it. I thought he was going to be tackled 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and somehow he shook loose and bursted into the end zone, and this is just a great individual effort from Austin.
Yep, unblocked defender there. He breaks the tackle and gets into the end zone, and we've had a lot of that from him this year. He's really had a great season.
Now let's shift the attention to Illinois Wesleyan because the playoff hope is still alive.
Yeah.
You know, you need some help, but you can take care of your own business this week against Illinois Wesleyan. Again, a ranked opponent, 15th in the nation right now. What do they bring to the table that you guys are trying to prepare for?
You know, they're a lot like Wheaton in that they're just a very sound football team on both sides of the ball and special teams as well. They have arguably the best offensive weapon in the conference in their receiver, number 14, Artie Kakin. Great player. Very fast. Just great reaction to the football and ability to close out to the ball as a receiver. So we have our hands full with him on defense. Offensively speaking, their defense has been very, very good. Solid defensive line. Linebackers are bigger guys, 220-pound guys, and their secondary has tons of experience. So they're going to be a formidable challenge, just like the other three ranked opponents have been, as you would expect.
Offensively, coming off this performance, 9 points, lowest output of the season. You guys are used to putting up 30, 40, 50 points a game. What is the focus this week in the lead up, and how do you keep the morale of the offense up and say, this is the week you guys need to really step it up and put the points up on the board?
Really, Kevin, it's just going back to the film and seeing what mistakes we made. Certainly as coaches, what can we do different? What personnel groupings are going to be our best fit going forward? And just executing, blocking and tackling. The game boils down to blocking and tackling. Obviously, you have to use great technique and be assignment sound, but at the end of the day, if you block and you tackle, you have a great chance to win every game you play. So for us offensively, it's back to basics. We're still a good team. We're still a good football team. And our guys need to understand that. We played a really good schedule and we've been close 3 times. But we've got to block better and tackle better, and we can beat anybody.
Well, like you said, the D3 landscape is still respecting you guys. Number 19 in the top 25, the only team with 3 losses. It's pretty impressive, the amount of respect that you're getting. And best of luck against Illinois Wesleyan. It's going to be another fun game to watch.
It will. Thanks, Kevin.
Best of luck, and thanks for stopping by.
No problem.
Up next, we have Eric Wilson and Jack Williams stopping by. We'll be right back on the Red Zone.
Before we sit down with the players, it's time for this week's play of the game. With the Little Brass Bell and the playoffs on the line, Dylan Warden rocks the one-handed grab on the end around. How about that toss from Alex Ulmer, but Warden, snaring it with just one hand, claims the play of the game.
Dylan Warden one-hands it! What a catch! That was fantastic. Oh my! Oh my!
Back on the Red Zone, and we have Jack Williams and Eric Wilson on the set here. And Jack, I want to start with you. The offensive line, you guys provided a nice push on that touchdown run, but overall, how do you assess your guys' performance against one of the best defensive lines, if not the best defensive line you guys faced this year?
Yeah, I mean, we did okay. It wasn't clearly just the rushing yards shows the fact that we didn't really get the push that we wanted. I mean, give Wheaton credit. Their linebackers filled fast, and their defensive front was stout, to say the least. So it definitely didn't make our jobs easy. I mean, we did okay, but not to the extent that we wanted.
High expectations that I'm sure you guys hold yourselves up to, but the intensity, I can't imagine how amped up you guys were before the game. How did you try and pace yourself? I'm gonna stick with Jack here. How did you pace yourself over the course of that game? Because playoffs were on the line, and the Little Brass Bell was on the line, and the rivalry was there, and I'm sure in the back of your mind. How did you pace yourself with all that adrenaline rushing through you? I
mean, like pregame, we always talk about reaching, let your intensity reach a peak right at game time and sustain it. I mean, it kind of goes with the same philosophy of don't get too high, don't get too low. And I mean, celebrate when things go good, but don't get too down on yourself when things go bad. Just try and maintain it. Because, I mean, regardless of what the score is, regardless of how much time is left in the game, especially against a team like Wheaton, it's going to be a dogfight. And you know that the game's never over until the clock reads 0.
Now, Eric, that first quarter, I mentioned it to you off air, was just so much fun to watch. You individually, you get the first sack, you get the second sack the next play, you come around the edge, you strip sack the guy, and you force a fumble. Was that just one heck of a quarter for you? Did you think, my oh my, am I playing some of the best football I've ever played?
No. I actually just thought it was all kind of like a product of Coach Murray's scheme. Like, if you go back on each of the sacks, I'm only the beneficiary of someone else's hard work. Like on the first one, I believe Steve Laramatis, he's actually like flushing him out of the pocket, and I'm just collapsing the pocket, and he trips over his own guy. The second one is like much of the same thing, and then I just happen to shake loose of my guy. And the third, Steve Denav, the other Steve, he actually sniffs out their screen, which makes him tuck it, and that just gives me time to get back there. So I'm just kind of in the right spot at the right time.
Now, the defense as a whole provided the pressure the entire day. John Egan with a sack, Sturzma with 2 sacks. That's a focal point, I know, for you guys, is to get after the quarterback. And then once you do that, you can create turnovers off of that. How excited were you guys? I know you came away with a loss, but taken away defensively, were you proud of the way that you guys came out and attacked their offensive line and their quarterback Bowers?
Yeah, no, we definitely were, especially from what happened last year. There was a whole bunch of, discussion over the upfront play, so we wanted to play more physical, and we feel like we came away doing that. But there's always room for improvement. We want to be able to kind of sustain that pressure throughout all 4 quarters, get after them, so guys like Kibbe, Nevsky, and the other guys can make plays in the defensive backfield and then come away with picks and things like that.
Now, Jack, back to you. The running game has been just phenomenal all season. It's a product of you guys creating the holes for, whether it was O'Shane in the first 2 games, Austin, Matt Randolph, Andrew Slett, all these guys have been putting up ridiculous numbers. I mean, it's been fun to watch. How do you get that back on track against Illinois Wesleyan? Was it communication? Is it, just figuring out how to attack them a little bit better?
I think it's a combination of both of those. We kind of got away from what we do, it seemed like, in that Wheaton game. We had some communication issues, but I think it's just getting back to the basics. Just getting physical up front. I think we were a little bit too worried about scheme, trying to make sure we covered up linebackers, maybe that kind of thing. When we don't worry so much about scheme and just play physical, we open up lanes and we let our fast guys go to work.
Now, coming off a game like this, I can't imagine it's easy to keep the morale up. Because, obviously you guys really wanted this win, but now you have a chance to still make the playoffs. There's still a way in. How do you kind of build that back up for Illinois Wesleyan and come out with that same intensity as you came out with against the Wesley, against the Wheaton?
Because that playoff hope is still there, for us to have any chance, we need to win out. We need to win out by a good margin. But on top of that, Wesleyan is a rival of ours. Like, we don't want to just win. We want to dominate. We want to dominate every opponent. But on top of just that, for the seniors, if we don't make the playoffs, they have 3 games left, and you don't want to just scrape by, go 2-1. You want to win out, and you want to do it in a dominant fashion and send those guys out the way that they deserve.
Kind of in the midway point of the preparation week for Illinois Wesleyan, this is the last thing I'll get to you guys. What's the message in the locker room? You've shifted the attention away from Wheaton and towards, Wesleyan. What's the message from the coaches? What's the message from some of the senior leaders?
It's always been no excuses, and it's always finish. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Like, we have a great opportunity to run the rest of the table, get these 3 wins, and if we get the help we need, then we're going to be right where we want to be. Like, we've had goals since the beginning of the season, and all of that is still on the table with a little help.
Well, I can say this, and I don't think I'll get an argument. You guys are the best 4-3 team in the nation. I think that shows up, considering the fact that you guys are still in the top 25, which is an impressive feat in and of itself. But best of luck come Saturday against Illinois Wesleyan. We'll be rooting for you guys, and thanks for stopping by, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You guys were awesome. Clark Tusher swings by to update us on Cardinal Athletics next on the Red Zone.
Looks like it's done.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
We welcome Clark Tusher into the program. Clark, let's start with the sport that hasn't actually begun, and this is basketball, and there's a lot of excitement building on these 2 teams, the men's and the women's program. The preseason polls came out, the CCIW polls came out. Both teams figure to be in the middle of the pack, at least according to those coaches, but I'm sure the programs are thinking much higher than a 3rd and a 4th place finish.
That's the coaches are pretty optimistic on both sides. about what they've got coming back. From the women's side, they did get a first place vote, wound up third, which is as high as they've been in that poll in the last few years. A show of respect for them getting into the tournament last year. And there's been some significant rule changes in the women's game. They're going to be playing 4 quarters instead of 2 halves this year. There's going to be some more stoppages of play. The response to that is Michelle's team is probably going to be able to play that kind of intensity with a shorter bench, so you've got the better players on the court for a longer period of time. So they think they might have a way to make that kind of situation work in their favor. On the men's side, a lot of people look at the fact that we lost our 2 post players from last year, but they really hit the recruiting trail hard this year. They've got a couple of transfers coming in and a really talented freshman class, including Coach Reardon's youngest son, Connor, who figures to be in the rotation. They really feel very good about. I really haven't seen Todd this optimistic about a team, since the squad that went to the Final Four. So that tells me something right there.
Well, you look at the way that team came about. That freshman class came in: Landon Gamble, Vince Kamick, Jack Burchett. It kind of came out of nowhere. Maybe we'll see a repeat of that. That'd be kind of fun to watch. I want to transition to soccer because this is a season that's now winding down. Both teams lost this past week, but have actually thrived in conference play to this point. The men were not looking very good, and then they hit conference and just surged. Where do they figure into the playoff picture right now? Do both teams have a chance to make a postseason appearance?
Well, against all odds, the men are actually in better shape heading into this last week. I mean, it looked bad for that group. They had a 10-game losing streak, which encompassed about a whole month of the calendar. But they went through a 4-game stretch where they allowed about 1 goal total in conference play to get themselves back into the hunt. They've got a 2-game series this week against a couple of teams that they figure they should have a chance to beat. They're on the road against Milliken, which could be a tough matchup. Milliken won that game at North Central last year, and then to close up at home on Saturday against Illinois Wesleyan. The women's side, they started off great. They've struggled a little bit lately. Again, they're also in a position where they can win and get themselves in, but Wesleyan's women's team has been nationally ranked all year long, so that's going to be a tough hurdle to get over to trying to get into the postseason.
Now, we've seen them a couple times broadcasting them live on NCTV 17. The men have provided the fireworks, especially Matt Koth with that 2-goal performance. It just seems like they've stepped up, and maybe that is Matt Koth emerging like he did last year. Is that something that maybe you've heard, that they feel pretty confident going into the rest of the season?
I think the biggest part was just staying confident in what they were doing. The ball bounces one way or another. It can cost you an entire game. So it was just staying with their assignments and staying disciplined on defense and being a little more aggressive and maybe in Matt's case taking charge a little more on the offensive end. And getting himself involved in the attack. So I think the biggest part for them was just staying together and staying focused despite things not going their way for quite a while.
Now, women's tennis has finished up. They went to the CCIW tournament. They came out of it 4th out of 8 teams. What was the feeling around the team after that finish? Was it positive? Was it kind of the next step forward?
I think they felt really good about how the season went altogether. Most of the results that happened at the conference tournament were pretty consistent with what happened during the year. So, they would have liked to see a little more movement up and see a few more individuals competing for championships. But I think they feel like they're in a good position, moving forward as far as the team dynamic and the team culture is concerned.
Last thing for you, the women's volleyball team, they're moving towards the end of their season. They've had some ups, they've had some downs, but overall it looks like a very strong team. What's the word coming out of that program? Do they feel confident that they can make a splash in the postseason play?
That they're in a similar situation as the soccer teams. They've got a chance to play themselves in, but they've got a tough road to do it. They had a really tough senior night match against a really tough team in Elmhurst and played relatively well against them based on past performances, despite losing the match. So, they've got 2 more matches to win their way in, and I think feel more confident than not that they can get it done.
Well, we're excited to see how some of these teams finish, and of course we're excited for the winter season as well. That's fast approaching. I mean, sports are starting in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for stopping by. We appreciate your time.
You bet.
That's all the time we have on this week's edition of the Red Zone. The Cardinals travel to Illinois Wesleyan to face the Titans this Saturday in a must-win game. check back for the highlights on nctv17.com. For everyone here on the Red Zone, I'm Kevin Jackman saying so long. We'll see you next week.